Thank you for taking the time to talk to the Japan CPO Association. Can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, I'm Geoff Baum. I'm currently VP of Marketing of a startup in the United States called Acceldata. I worked at Adobe for a long time, and while I was working at Adobe, I often got requests to work with other startups. One of the groups that asked me if I would help them with their startups was something called the German Accelerator, which is a early and mid-stage startup accelerator in Silicon Valley that helps German startups come to the United States. About 5 years ago, I started working very heavily with Canadian companies. And I started working with a program called the Lazaridis Scale-Up Program from the Lazaridis Institute, which is part of a university in Waterloo called the Laurier University.
You also spent some time in Japan. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, when I was just graduated from college, I got a job. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and I got a job with a law firm, a big American law firm called Morrison & Foerster, which was at the time the biggest law firm in California. The case that I was working on was an arbitration between a very, very large Japanese computer company that was our client and the biggest, at the time, the biggest computer company in the world, which was IBM. And so I got transferred, or I got asked if I wanted to transfer to Tokyo and work in Tokyo representing our client. So I lived in Tokyo for about 2 years in Toritsu Daigaku.
Great.
I worked in Konda.
Nice. Very local. So we used to work together at Adobe. Can you tell us about the Entrepreneur in Residence program at Adobe?
Sure. So I worked at Adobe as an Entrepreneur in Residence, what they call an EIR. And an Entrepreneur in Residence at Adobe. The Entrepreneur in Residence is a title that a lot of VC firms use, but typically what it means is you're supposed to start a new business or start a new company, especially at a VC firm. Adobe, what it was is it was a role that was designed to help find new business opportunities for Adobe to expand their revenue and expand their business. So I was looking for ways to take Adobe technology or take Adobe experience, expertise, and apply it to new markets and create new products. So the idea was to start little startup businesses within Adobe that run very much like startups, but they were doing it within a corporate framework. And during the time at Adobe, I did this for about a half a dozen different products.
And can you share the process? I think a lot of companies are very interested to understand how established companies get the resources and who do you pitch to and how do you get the resources? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so when I worked at Adobe, I worked in something called the Advanced Technology Group or the Advanced Technology Labs. And that group was a group that mainly housed all of Adobe's PhD research scientists. If I found something, I would, just like a startup founder, I would kind of create like a pitch or a vision of what that could be. And, you know, like a mini business plan or a startup presentation, investment presentation. And then I would pitch it to my boss, who was the chief software architect or the head of the Advanced Technology Group. So it was almost like, it was analogous to like a startup going to VCs or angel investors. I would go to my boss, who was kind of like an angel investor, and he would give me a little funding and say, you know, you can work on this and you can hire some people. And then if I made progress and success, then I'd go to the executive team, which was usually the CEO, the president, maybe the CFO, and often like one or two other high-level SVP or C-level executives. And then I would present to them and say, you know, we've got this business idea, we've made this progress. We think we can penetrate this market, and here's why this is strategic to Adobe. This is how much funding I need, and this is the resources I need to do this. Can I get $500,000 or $1 million to take it to the next stage and see if I can make progress? And then I'd come back 6 months later and say, okay, I spent that money and this is what I did, and here's what I've accomplished, and here are the customers I have, and here's the product I built. Can I now have some more money and some more people? And at some point, if I had enough success, I would usually then find the appropriate business group, the appropriate division in Adobe, and take that product into that division and make it a real Adobe product. So I did this for, like I said, an enterprise software product where I was able to grow the business from zero in just an idea in a PowerPoint to $10+ million in revenue. And then we brought it into the business unit, the enterprise software business unit, Adobe, which was called Lifecycle. Then I also did this for Premiere Express, which was Adobe, a web-based Adobe video editor, Photoshop Express, which originally was a web-based photo editor that we made into a mobile app, or iOS and Android app. And then we did it for Photoshop.com. So we created a number of businesses out of these ideas, some which were very successful, like Photoshop Express, I think has something like 500 million users today. The ideas that we had, the products that we built, we were the first group at Adobe and the first products at Adobe where we were doing web-based creative tools and mobile apps on, the popular mobile platforms that you see today. So Photoshop Express was the first app at Adobe to be on iOS and Android.
Oh yeah, I love that product. Can you tell us about who you hired in terms of when you talked about you got the resources? Who did you hire first, and then who did you hire next?
So usually I would be the business founder. I would be the project leader or startup leader, and I would hire or partner with, not necessarily hire, but partner with a technical leader. So usually that was someone at Adobe. So it was often someone who was like a principal scientist, a very high level technical expert who could help me prototype and build technology. And then we would find various resources within Adobe and then hire from outside of Adobe. So our startup teams usually would start with like 3 people, like me and a technical co-founder and maybe an engineer. And then it would grow to 5 or 6 people. We'd hire a few more technical people to build something. I would serve the role of business leader, product manager, and marketing, and kind of all business related activities. And then we'd have a small technical team. And then once we started having success, we'd usually build the team to something like 10 or 12 people. We'd hire like a functional, some of these functional experts, like a product manager and a product marketing person. And then we'd build out the the engineering team, and usually hire some QA and some other technical resources. So it was very much like, your sequence of hiring in a startup. You'd have maybe a founder and then a bunch of technical people building the product. And then as you started getting some market traction and funding, you build out the team a little bit. The thing that might be interesting to people is that at Adobe, we would typically hire about 50% of the people from internal Adobe employees, and about 50% we'd bring in from outside. And that wasn't necessarily a defined objective or agenda that we did it that way. It's just that's typically how it worked, is that we'd have a lot of internal resources that we could leverage from Adobe, and then we'd bring in some external people because we needed some things that we didn't necessarily have internally.
So what was one of your favorite products that you worked on?
Well, I think Photoshop Express was really a favorite of mine, just because of the success it had. And also just looking back, this was at a time when Adobe really was a box software company. And I and my colleagues saw the opportunity to do things online. So first we created a Photoshop Express online editor. And this was kind of at the time, this was probably, 15 years ago, we thought it was a big deal that you could provide access to powerful editing tools in an online SaaS-based environment. And so we did this for Photoshop. We did this for Premiere, the video editing tool. Then we created an online service where you could store your photos online in a online repository. And that was something that was at the time fairly innovative. Now it seems like an obvious thing, but at the time was fairly innovative. And then I started hearing about the iPhone, and I was like, we had tried to do this with some of the early smartphones, but these were really like flip smartphones. They weren't iPhones or Android phones. And we had done some integrations with some of those phones, but it really was like still too wonky and hard, and the user experience wasn't great. But then I heard about the iPhone and saw the iPhone, and I was like, we really need to do this. And so if I'm remembering correctly, we had an iPhone app out in October, the year the iPhone was released. So just a few months after the iPhone was released, we had built an iPhone app. And my boss at the time told me I'd be lucky. So we released it in October. He said we'd be lucky if we had 100,000 users by the end of the year. So in 3 months, and we had 1 million users in 5 days. And we were the #1 app on the App Store for a number of days in a row, I think several weeks in a row. And then we were the #1 app on the App Store in different countries, and we were the #1 photo app for a long time. So, I can thank Adobe's brand name for that, but there was a lot of pent up demand, and there was a huge market opportunity. And 10, 12, 13 years later, Photoshop Express has hundreds of millions of users and is still a highly used and successful app for Adobe. So it was good timing, and we took advantage of the opportunity.
Great. So how did you define the product market fit for that product, for Photoshop Express?
We were looking for what was the value hypothesis to users. And for me, it was really about, I'm not a professional photographer and I'm not a sophisticated photo editor. And for me, it was really about, if I had a phone like this, which more and more people were buying at that point, how could I take and edit photos? How could I make my photos look great? And do it in a very easy way on my mobile phone. I didn't want to have to take pictures from my phone and export them to my desktop, edit them in some complicated Photoshop-like editing environment, and then put them back on my mobile phone to show people or to share. I wanted to be able to do it all in one place. And so what I was thinking is, how could I democratize access to high quality images? How could I create more accessibility for powerful editing tools that were still simple to use? So the whole idea was how could I create a product that fit the big market, not just the professional photographer market, but the big market of people who cared about photos but didn't have the skills or the time or the interest to go buy Photoshop and learn how to use it. And so, is the connection between how do I put power in people's hands where they can take and edit and make their photos look great in a very easy, quick way. And so when I was able to do that first with iOS and then with Android, I was like, okay, now that's product market fit. There's value for the users. There's people who really want to use that, people who care about the simplicity, the accessibility, the fact that they could do this quickly in their hands and be proud to share high quality photos. So my idea was, how can I get Adobe editing tools into people's hands through their mobile phones and online so that everyone can access these tools, especially people like college students or high school students or aspiring creative editors. It's the technique that Apple's used for years and years. They went to the universities and they made deals with the universities to give discounts to students so that they could buy Apple products and Apple computers so that they would use them in college and then they would become lifelong Apple users. And I had the same exact idea. There's these new venues where people were using technology, whether that was the web or their mobile phones. And I wanted to put the technology where those people were. The other thing that I tried to do was do partnerships with other big companies like, at the time, YouTube and Facebook.
So once you release the product, what metrics do you follow in terms what metrics help you make the business decisions that you should make next? For example, is it new users? Is it adoption? Is it revenue? Or is it when you decide to invest into marketing?
So that depends. The answer to that depends on your business and your business model. For me, I had a couple business models. One business model was just a free model to try and get people to buy other Adobe products. So that model was all about engagement. Were users downloading and using my products? So if you think about the mobile app products like Photoshop Express, were they using the product? Were they downloading the app? Were they using it? Were they engaged with it? What features were they using? And then what were they doing with their photos? And then was there any kind of conversion to some kind of paid Adobe service or app, like paid storage or paid printing of photos or, paid photo-related products, or were they upgrading to something like Photoshop or Photoshop Elements or Lightroom? So those were all things that I was tracking, was downloads, engagement at the feature level, and then conversions to paid apps. In a more paid type of scenario where you have a paid business model, you're really looking at all of those things plus the kinds of revenue that you're generating, the cost per user acquisition, the churn rate. You're really trying to understand what are the unit economics of your customer and how successful can this business be. So when you start to see the unit economics really start to pay off, or alternatively, qualitatively, when you see that you have product market fit, like people are really engaged with your product and using it heavily and having a great experience with it, that's when you want to step on the gas and you want to think about going from your product market fit stage to your go-to-market fit stage. And that, that's a critical transition that almost every startup screws up and doesn't understand the value of. So most startups, and I would say almost all non-American startups, think solely about product market fit. They think that if I've built a great product, that great product is going to help me win the market. But the reality is it's not the great product that wins the market. It's the product that sells the most that wins the market. And that's something that most startups never understand. So you really need to understand how you transition from product market fit to go-to-market fit. So how do you transition from, okay, I know who my user is. I know why they really want to use my product. I can provide them value. I've got a compelling product and experience for them. Now, how do I scale that? There's a really great podcast by the founders of Airbnb where they talk about this. So how do I create a handcrafted experience for a digital experience for a specific user? They talk in very detailed language. They talk about, this is what we went through to build a product that appealed to the type of user we wanted to sell to. And then once they create that great handcrafted experience where that user loved that product, then and only then did they think about scaling it. And they thought about scaling it from the product perspective. So how can we support many users using our product at one time? But they also thought about, okay, how can we scale the business model? And that's the right sequence. The problem with most startups is they think they come in thinking about, how do I create a scalable business? But they don't even have a business because they haven't got product market fit. So the sequence has to be right. Get product market fit and then think about growth, not think about scalable growth from the beginning. And this idea of handcrafted experiences is a great conceptual guidepost.
Common mistakes that a product or founder might make.
Building a product that you're technically proud of, but doesn't actually meet user demands or solve an urgent problem. The customer is always the center of the business. And a lot of founders think about them or their products as the center of their business. And they talk about their business in a product-centric way or in a me-centric way. The customer is always the center of the business and the customer is always the hero of the story. And so that's one mistake, is that people get too wrapped up on what they think is right and not what the customer thinks is right, or not what the customer needs, not solving a customer's urgent problem. You want to go talk to a lot of customers, and those customers are all providing you input. But ultimately, you, the founder, you, the product person, are making the decisions. You're synthesizing all of that information in your head, in addition to, what you think your business could be, what you think the market opportunity could be, and you're creating a business in your mind out of all these different components, all these different inputs. If you get that right, you can create a great product and a great business. If you get that wrong, or if you let the customers just direct you to what they want, you become a consulting firm. And that's the difference, is that you're taking inputs, but ultimately as a product person, you're making the decision based on all of these inputs because you're doing a meta level analysis. You're not just doing input from one person and building something.
Can you tell us the differences between Silicon Valley startups and international startups?
So Silicon Valley startups think about, for one, is they sell before they do. So international startups, these are stereotypes, but international startups, and my experience has validated these stereotypes. But international startups often are very product centric. They're very technology centric, and they will only talk about their features and capabilities, but they don't talk about their vision or the why. And they only talk about their product once the product is built. Whereas a Silicon Valley startup knows that growth is the most important thing. So what do? They grow at all costs. Now, I'm not saying a Silicon Valley startup is better than an international startup. I'm just saying that they're different. But a Silicon Valley startup will do things like sell before they've actually built the product, or sell before the features, available. In international startups, the opposite. they will only sell after. So the way I think about this is American and Silicon Valley startups sell in front of their product, and international startups often sell behind their product. What happens in the marketplace, though, is that if you have a well-funded Silicon Valley startup, they are able to use this kind of more compelling go-to-market techniques and sales and marketing techniques to get the market traction and get the market awareness around what they're doing, even if they don't have the best technology or best product. And then they're able to very quickly backfill. You know, they because they're growing fast, they can raise money and they can backfill their product features. So it's been a very successful technique for a lot of companies, even though their technology is not the best technology.
Have you ever mentored Japanese companies?
Yes, I've worked with a lot of Japanese companies, and I think Japanese companies, unfortunately, typically fall into some of these stereotypes where they make these mistakes. They're very technology focused. They have a hard time communicating to customers outside of the kind of feature-based communication. They don't do a good job of explaining the why or how the customer is the center of the experience. So they get caught in this, we've built this technology, here are all these features, let me walk you through all the features, which can be effective for a certain type of customer audience, but it's not effective for a lot of customers.
Great. So you also mentioned in your intro that you teach at the Lazardis Institute, and you're the chief mentor and executive fellow of the highly successful scale-up program. Can you tell us about some of the topics you teach?
Yeah, so at Lazaridis, I'm responsible for the whole program. So all of the content and the programming and the whole mentor network. I do this jointly with another chief mentor. So there's two of us that do this. And we focus on all aspects of scaling your business. So what are all the obstacles that you might face as you're a Canadian company or an international company trying to scale your business and become globally competitive? So the idea is that these companies, which are typically 5 to 50 million in revenue, they're going to face challenges as they're trying to grow their business. They're going to face obstacles, and we're going to bring in experts. And I personally will teach them, but we also bring in a whole variety of experts to teach them on how to overcome these obstacles. You can't do that just with founders. You run out of time, and it's just physically impossible. So at some point you need to scale, and there's a process of doing this. So a lot of this is around the discipline of how do you scale a company? What are the signals and signs to look out for, the obstacles to watch out for, and how do you avoid those obstacles? How do you avoid making the mistakes that lots of other companies are making? So there's an art and science to doing this successfully. And I try and help companies understand both the artistic and creative aspect of that, as well as the discipline and scientific aspect of that. I also talk and teach a lot about product marketing, positioning, so fundraising, presentations and pitching. How do you create compelling presentations for both investors and for customers? What are the things that you can do to incorporate the why and the emotion into your sales process, whether that's talking to an investor or customer? Those are some of the topics that I talk about.
Any advice to the entrepreneurs out there that are considering their startup in Japan?
Yeah, I would say that make sure that if you're planning on becoming a global company, if you're planning on selling outside of just the Japanese market, that you understand how to sell effectively, how to build products and sell effectively for other markets, other types of people, other cultures. How do you tell a story where the customer is the center of the story? And how do you build a product where the customer experience and the customer value and solving the customer's urgent pain is the critical part of the story? And finally, from product market fit, the key aspect of it is, especially as you're starting, is you want to find a beachhead market. You want to find a very narrow target segment where the customer has such an urgent pain that relates directly to the value that you provide and the differentiation that you have over other potential solutions. So how do you connect your unique value proposition with the customer's urgent pain and make that connection so that you have product market fit? And the last thing is stay focused. Startups tend to be too diffuse in their strategy. They get distracted by too many things. They lose focus. And as a startup, you just don't have the resources to lose focus. You need to stay very focused and aligned.
Great. Thank you very much, Geoff, for sharing your experience with the Japan CPO Association. I hope to be able to see you soon. Maybe in the future, we'll be able to have a in-person event and you'll be able to join us.
Yeah, I'll look forward to coming to Japan again and seeing you all soon.